Right, well look, thank you all for coming. Full house, which is amazing. I don't know if anyone hasn't got a drink, but if you want to quickly grab a drink, help yourself. If not, we'll start. So I always do this, because it's good for me to start, to get me into a little bit of a flow of the buffer sheet. Now, I'm going to repeat, and some have heard it before, but I call it the buffer sheet because, as I always explain, this is to help you find presence, and we're going to go into that in a bit deeper of what presence is. And I know some of you know, some of you don't, so I have to try and gauge sort of a sweet spot in the middle. But these practices I do as much as I can on a daily basis, so that when, depending on people's jobs, lifestyle, things like that, I have a pretty easy, quiet life anyway. So it's not difficult for me to find some silence or to sit. But if you've got a busy life, it's not easy. So you're trying to just find minutes in the day to find a little bit of stillness, a little bit of quiet, a little bit of presence, which is where we're talking about that really. Ultimately, presence is when you're here now. And we've all heard about that, but what that actually means is you're not in your head thinking about the past or the future. That's a simple explanation of what it is. But so what we're trying to do tonight is get you to, these are only words and information, but if you've experienced it, because we've all experienced it in doing certain things where you're hyper-focused and you're really present on what the activity is you're doing. So if you do yoga, breath work, sound healing, things like that, you're probably there, but you could go off and think. So this is more just a case of, in everyday practice, bring yourself back to remember. Like, I love it. I've been using it a lot lately. Gurdjieff used to say it, remembering oneself in anything you do. Like, I can remember when I first heard that quote or read it in a book and it said, remember oneself. I started walking down the road with my dog and I just sort of keep bringing myself, like almost you visualise yourself as an avatar in a game. You are walking down that road. That is all you're doing. There's nothing else that needs to be done. Are you there or in your head? Are you there? Are you literally there? Because you can say you're physically there, but consciously you're not. So that remembering oneself. So this buffer sheet is just to try and create some space throughout the day that when something comes up, which it always does, that might drag you out of consciousness. That's if you was in being conscious at the time anyway, because I'd suggest most of us aren't, that you've got a little bit of a buffer to maybe take a moment to sort of just go, it either triggered me, it caught me off guard, whatever. You've now, I like to think of it, and I think it's true, you cultivate time and space. So if you meet people who have much more time and space in their life, you feel it when you meet them. So like when you go to rural places and, people have a slower pace of life, or different countries where there is a lot slower pace of life, people feel it. You feel the energy and you instantly relax when you're in these places. That's why people pick these places to go on holiday, because the lifestyle is slower. So you could say that's the energy of the place, but also the people. So, and when, you could be sitting somewhere and someone who may be, let's say, busy, walks into a room, you can feel it.
Yeah, definitely.
So this is about cultivating time and space, and that can mean nicking a minute here, a second, whatever, just to try that you've got. I almost feel it as the more I sit and practice presence, and I don't meditate like traditionally in the sense that every morning I sit there and I meditate for 20 minutes or half an hour. I just try and do it all the time. And I've got lots of little practices I never close my eyes unless I'm compelled to close my eyes. So sometimes I'll just be sitting there where I live on the balcony and I do an open eye meditation and I visualise there's a centre point in my head. And I think it's called Cave of Brahma is what it's called in some spiritual teachings. And it's not your pineal gland, it's not your, there's a tiny little cavity in your head and it's the centre point of your head. I don't know much about it, I don't need to know much about it, I know where it is, I found it. And it directly sits centre, and it comes out of here, and it comes out front and back here. And it's your third eye, basically. And I don't know if anyone knows what your third eye is. It's like a chakra here that you can, suppose you've got 7 chakras, not suppose it, there is. And I put my attention right in the middle, and I sit there, and it takes practice. And you can move it to anywhere. You can move it into your heart. It's funny, I spent most of my life just always putting my attention here, which is the breath. But anyway, so I sit there, get into that state, and then suddenly I'm in it. And because my attention I'm drawing it constantly back to this centre point in my mind, the thoughts stop. And then I might be compelled. So now I'm looking around with no thought. And then sometimes I will be compelled to close my eyes, and you can go deeper into that. But I rarely do it. So this is... meditation is amazing. Go do it. I always say that because it will teach you how to quieten your mind. It will, because, if you go into a meditation class and that door shuts, I always say you've got to have some balls to get up in the middle of it and walk out. So you're there for the 20 minutes or half hour. And that can be uncomfortable for some people to sit in silence for that long. So if you've never done it, go do meditation classes. And someone actually recommended it to me once, and it was for a really good purpose. Is that I was working on other stuff and I didn't really want to be around people. I was feeling a bit sort of vulnerable at the time, or raw, let's say. But it's still good to be around people. There is, especially in a meditation room, that's probably a nicer. And she said, go meditation. So you can sit in a room with people, but you don't have to engage. So it's just nice to get out, do something, but you don't have to do the talking when you're not feeling particularly sociable, or emotions could be coming up, so things like that. So, and it was really good advice, because I'd go thinking, and I'd sit in a room and that door would shut, and then for half hour, we'd just sit there in silence, close your eyes. She'd do a little bit of guiding in and then guide you out, and then I'd leave, walk home, and I always felt better for it. But this isn't about meditation, but go do it, because it is really good. And it just teaches you how to find a stillness within you. So I'll just run through some of these quickly. But this is what the buffer sheet is for. So these are just like tips and tricks of what I do. So find a spot. I always go on about this one, but I love this one. Explore your local area. Even when you go to the shops, do whatever. Can be around where you live, if you live in a nice area. Could be anywhere, outside. I mean, honestly, I was thinking about this the other day. Smokers always find good spots, because they're trying to find a quiet spot to have a cigarette, even if it's outside a factory. You'll find them somewhere behind a skip on a pallet, and they've probably made a nice little place for themselves to sit. But you're just looking, depending on what your job is, your work is, if you're retired or you have spare times, go and explore and find somewhere that feels good to sit. And it can be anywhere. So this is about you using your own intuition to see if it feels nice. And so I've got a few benches and coffee shops that I don't always go in. I'll just sit outside. And I know it feels good. And I'll tell you what is interesting. Another nice little story. I sat on, I don't know if you know the bench outside the church in Malden, opposite the coffee shop there. And it's not the one out, it's the one actually in the grounds. I sit on there sometimes, and it's always nice. And it's strangely, not many people sit there. And it's a still place. It's quite quiet, even though it's a busy high street. It's a nice thing to be sometimes in a busier place, to just see if you can not use your mind to comment on everything that's going on around you. So to see people walking past, doing this, doing that, someone might park badly. Your brain just wants to commentate on all of it. Why are they doing that? Oh my God, what's that done? Why are they doing? Oh my God. So, you're just sitting there, you're just trying to observe, and we'll get into that later, but you're just trying to find some stillness. But I was sitting there, and I've had different encounters there. Some people come up and won't ever sit next to you, because it's only like a small bench. So some people don't like proximity to other people, especially if they're trying to sit on a bench. But this lady walked past, and this is a nice story, and I think, and she sort of shuffled past, and I thought she was older than she was, but I think she just had some mobility problems. And anyway, she said, is it okay if I sit next to you? Because I looked at her face and she had quite a sweet, nice face, but she wasn't as old as she seemed to me. I said, yeah, sit down. And I sat down, she sat down next to me, and I had a cup of tea and a roll up, and I was just sitting there. And she started talking to me, and now I'm completely deaf in this ear. So I couldn't hear what she said. And I said to her, I'm sorry, I'm deaf in this ear. And she then just said, oh, that's interesting. You always assume people can hear. So straight away, that's an interesting thing to say. Yeah. So no, and she went, oh, anyway, I don't know, we didn't talk, and I finished my cup of tea and cigarette. And as she was sitting there, the more still you get, the more present you are, the less the mind is active. You do start to engage other abilities, let's say, you know? You become more intuitive, because it's not that you're becoming more intuitive, you've just quietened down so that you can hear things that you wouldn't naturally hear. So you can all do this. There's no one more intuitive or in touch with this than anyone else. It's just that if you learn to quieten, you get to hear it. So as she was sitting next to me, I'm pretty good at feeling someone's energy. And I sat there, and for a moment, I forgot she was even there. I didn't get anything. I didn't feel uncomfortable. I didn't feel any edginess, nothing. I would not have known she was there. She was a still person. Her energy was still. Anyway, so when I finished my cup of tea and cigarette, and I turned to her and said, oh, and I started a conversation, because now I can hear her. And we got talking about living in the area, if she was local, the standard conversation. And then we discussed how things had changed, because she'd lived around that area for like 40 years. And so inevitably the conversation went into change and how the world is changing. And we didn't go into details, and she just said, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming at times, what's going on in this world. And she said, and I was, I don't know this woman. She's just sharing this lovely little moment. And she just said, and I was sitting thinking about this, and I thought, what can I do? There's too much to do. Where do you start? I mean, you look around, there's problems everywhere. She said, so I sat and I was thinking about it. I thought, do you know what I can do? I can do something. She said, I decided I'm just going to be kinder, nicer, and just everybody I meet, I'm just going to be the best I possibly can. And she said, and I thought, that's got to make a difference, hasn't it? And I'm sitting there and I'm going, I think you've hit it. I don't think that. And she went, and then she said to me, have you ever heard of this thing called the forgiveness prayer? I was like, I think I know. And she said, well, I've started doing that. And you know what? I think it works. And she's got to be in her, early 70s. And she said, I sit at night and I think of people and I just think positive thoughts for them and wish them well. And she said, but part of this prayer, she said, you have to think of people that you don't like, that have upset you or harmed you or you haven't forgiven. And she went, and that's really hard to do at the beginning because you don't want to. But she said, the more I do it, the more I put them straight up the front. She said, and I forgive them and wish them wonder. And then it was funny, I went home and I went to pick my dog up from my mum's and I told my mum about this. And my mum went, did you tell her that you give talks on presents? I went, I didn't need to. That woman is doing it. She's already there. And it was interesting, before even her opening her mouth and talking to me, I could feel she was still. There was less going on. Other people, we all know it. And again, you've got to be quiet to feel it. But someone can be in your presence and instantly you just, you've got to adjust, or you can try and stay as you are, but they're less likely to adjust. We always change our energy depending on where we are. So finding a spot is a good practice because you have little encounters like that. Because honestly, I lived in Brighton and Hove for 20 years and I used to sit on my step every morning pretty much. I used to let the dog go out for a toilet and I'd have a cup of tea, a cigarette. I know it's a cigarette, but whatever, my little roll up. And I'd sit there in silence and people would walk past and they know when you're still and they know when you're ready to listen because they stop. And I knew most of the people on that street who were working from home, retired or whatever. So I, could see them throughout the day. And I'll tell you what, it's so interesting. There was like my steps, a little bit of a pathway, and then the street. And, that little threshold was such a good gauge as well of people's boundaries. Because most people would, there's no gate, they'd stand there and they'd say hello from the street and talk to you. And if I knew them well, they'd come in and sit next to me. I'd invite them in or whatever, or make them a cup of tea. And then some people I didn't know would step straight over that. And I used to take that as a sign of going, right, I'm not going to give you too much because you'll take too much. And that's no judgment on them, but because I learned from experience that I'd sit there and listen to all these people's problems, and they'd be back the next day. And then they'd be back the next day, or they'd be back that afternoon. And they're just, because I'm now sitting there listening, and I was really listening, and too much. I was practicing at the time, listening with my body just to see. And it gets you into trouble because these people have not felt that level of intimacy when listening. Because I would go like really quiet in my mind, open up and give them everything and listen. Stupidly, because they don't need that much. But I was practicing with this thing, and they would turn up, and some of them used to ring the doorbell and demand to sort of talk to me. And even I had one lovely woman sent me an email and she'd fallen in love with me. I'd met her 3 times because, and I had to say to her, I was just being friendly, but I luckily had a teacher at the time who told me, dial it down. You do not need to be doing that for everybody because they may not have felt that for a long time. So finding a spot leads to all of these amazing little things. Just sit there and be still. And I'll tell you what's interesting as well, that you may sit there and depending on your levels, I don't know how much people practice presence, and we will get into a bit more detail, but it can be uncomfortable. You might sit there and you get fidgety and the mind starts going, and you're like, I can't sit, and then best thing to do is there's only two things you can do there, is you get up, move, maybe find somewhere else. If it keeps happening, you realise it's you, it's not the spot. So sometimes persevere and just stay there and get through that initial couple of minutes. Change your body position if you want, try and relax, and if the mind's going, which it pretty much is all the time, you just start to just let it. You just let it. And people go, how do I quieten my mind? You're not going to. You just let it do what it does. But you just try and relax. And, always watch your breath. We can do that in a bit. But to just observe your breath is a great way to take the attention from the mind. But finding a spot is a great one. And if you struggle with it, let the mind go then. I mean, you ain't got, because you can get into the annoyance pattern if the mind's going, then you're like, oh, my mind's going, then that's now taken up your energy and your thoughts. So, be gentle on yourself, try these things out, experiment, but finding a spot's a good one. If you're on holiday, if you're working, whatever, just find little spots. So when you're out in town and you're doing things, take 5 minutes, just go and sit down. Silence. I've learned I was never great with silence, and now I couldn't live without it. So you do change and you do learn to start to like things that you once found uncomfortable. Luckily I live on my own with my dog, so there's a lot of silence if I want it. So, but honestly, it's amazing. And it's not, I don't mean complete silence, but just to have no noise like a TV, computer one or music. Like I will listen to things, I'll watch things on YouTube, I watch things in the evening on Netflix, I do all of them things, but I do turn things off on purpose sometimes just to hear. And do you know what I enjoy when I'm in silence is the little noises, like when you're making a cup of tea, the kettle boiling, then the pouring of the water in, then the chinking as you serve it, and so you start to notice, and even walking or even the dog snoring, all the things you hear out of silence. I enjoy it now. And I've got to tell you, I never used to. I always liked something on. I always used to, when I was a teenager, I had headphones on, listening to music. And I've now learned, there's nothing wrong with that, but I was using it because it did help quieten the mind. It stopped me thinking. I was now listening to music. So we all the things I did as a youngster, and in my, 20s, 30s, even 40s, I'm starting to see why I did them and not judge them and just go, they helped. And now I've found not coping. These aren't coping mechanisms now. We're not talking about how to cope with life stresses. We're talking about really how you can separate yourself from them by quietening the mind. And that's not disassociation. We're just talking about what is really going on. Is it going on in here, or is it happening now? So when you're sitting on a bench and you're stressing out, is the problem happening while you're sitting on that bench? No. 99% of the time, problems aren't happening to us. They're happening in here, in the future, or we're worrying about things in the past, or shame, or guilt, or hurt, or all of these things. And it's rarely happening now. So, silence is a good one. And even if when you're in silence, you're not enjoying it and you do want to put something on, just notice that. Don't judge it. Put something on. Put the radio on. Whatever you do to not have silence or you want to do something, just notice you did it. That's all you need to do. You don't judge it. You don't do anything with it. You're just observing your behaviour. And silence is a great one for that because there's nothing else going on. And you do hear your thoughts louder when it's silent, which is why people don't like silence. So I'm saying have some silence because I want you to hear the voices in your head, because then you'll go, oh my God, it doesn't shut up. Like, they don't. And we all think they do because we put a TV on or we put the radio on or we're chatting to someone on the phone or we're on Instagram or we're on Facebook and we'll go, oh no, my brain's not going all the time. It's just because you've distracted it by watching these things. And it's like I said last time, that's now thinking for you. As soon as you take all of them out of the equation, it's boom, back onto full pelt and it's going on about a load of nonsense that, unless it's solving a crossword puzzle or working out plans or something like that, it's amazing at it. But like I said, it ain't for emotions. It's not for emotions. It's not. It thinks it is. It convinces you it is, but it isn't. And I've got some notes. So anyway, silence. I'll skip the soft focus because that was almost what I was talking about, meditation with the eyes open, sitting somewhere and just don't label anything. Really try and just look at gaps, spaces, stillness. You're trying to find stillness in sound and in sight. So, I did it at the, try and observe. I think we was doing it. Instead of looking at, them weights over there, look at the space between me and them weights. So I'm looking and you focus on the bit in between. It sounds like a stupid thing to do, but it just softens your view. And what you're doing is you're doing the same as observing your breath. You're putting your attention on nothing, space, emptiness. And the brain doesn't know what to do with that. It struggles to comment on that because it's not something it can judge. It's not red, it's not blue, it's not ugly, it's not pretty, it's not small, it's not big, it's nothing. So the brain just, you bastard, I've got nothing to say about this. So that's what you do. You're always just trying to distract with nothingness, not TVs or not, phones or Facebook, whatever. Reminders. This was an added on one, but everyone who had it last time it's like a practice so that throughout the day you're going to become unconscious. And when I say that, I don't mean you're on the floor and asleep. I mean conscious is to be present, unconscious is if you're in here. Right, so that's the definition or the distinction between it. I don't mean unconscious as in asleep, but technically you are asleep if you are running on this all the time. You're not there. So you can. People say I'm awake. I always say to what? Because there's like levels of awake. And especially recently with all the truth that's coming out in the world, and people say I'm awake to this, I'm awake to that. You're waking up, I'd say. you know, and when I wake up in the morning, as soon as I open my eyes to see that, I'm not awake at that point. I'm in half and half, the sleep in my eyes, it takes a while. So I'd say most people who think they're awake have woken up, maybe, let's say, and it could take, you know, a lot longer. Because I'd say what waking up really is, in my terms of when they say they're awake, is presence. When you are here all of the time, or majority of your time, which sounds like a high bar, but we might as well aim, I'm going to swear, fucking high. Let's aim high, and then if we fall short, it doesn't matter, does it? So let's like, you know, one of my good friends who will probably listen to this, she aims extremely high, and I was going, what are you doing? You're only going to fail. And she's like, well, why not aim the highest? You know, she wants to be present and only exist, or everything coming through her is through love. And I'm like, oh my God, that's impossible. You can't do that. And she's like, I'm aiming that high. That's what I want my life to be. Why not? So let's all join her in that, and we're going to aim high. We're going to be conscious all the time. And when we fail, we haven't failed, because we're just aiming there. But so reminders is a case of every day you do routine things. So like you get in a car, you walk downstairs, you go to the toilet, you brush your teeth, the things you do every day in your life. So use them, because you're already doing them, walking through a doorway. You know, I've heard people use that one. Every time they walk through a doorway, they just take a moment to go, take one conscious breath and remind themselves, I am here. You know, you don't have to say it, because again, that's using your mind. You just look around and observe where you are and see how you feel. You know, and that's an interesting thing, you know, in the last sort of, I don't know, whatever, when you ask people how they feel, most people never know how to answer that. Like, a certain generation, I don't know if it's for all, but most that I know, you ask them how they feel and they'll tell you what they've done. Well, I went here, I did this, blah, 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 and I'm like, I didn't ask what you did. I said, how do you feel? How are you doing? Well, I see thingy bob the other. That's, to me, is not any answer to like, but that's what most people will respond to. If you ask someone genuinely how you are feeling, the reason we avoid it, we don't know. Because we're not really in touch with feeling. We don't know at the moment. Because we're just going about unconsciously, going to work, shopping, doing this, talking to this person. You know, we only ever usually start to feel anxiety and things like that. If we're a busy person, we can avoid these things somewhat. But it creeps out when it's quiet, or when we're about to go to bed, or when we're about to go to sleep, because we've kept busy all day. And as soon as we start to close our eyes, boom, it all... Oh, now I'm going to hound you. You've avoided me all day, and now I'm going to hound you, and the mind will kick in. So asking people so check in on how you are feeling, and I mean all of it. How's your emotional, physical, just everything. You know, like we can do it now. How do you feel? Like you can move your attention to any part of your body. You can do that anytime you like. Everyone's capable of doing it. You can move your attention. If I say now, don't look at your feet, what do your feet feel like? Move your attention to your feet. Are they hot, comfortable, cold? You can move your attention to your feet. You can do it. You just move your attention to, I'm not going to tell you to do it. You can all do it. So you can move that attention to anywhere in your body. You can do a full body scan. In the mornings, it's great. Sit there and just check how you're feeling. You know, like, and usually you can find anxiety that lives in a place. We all know what that feels like. It's like, so, you know, find that, acknowledge that it's there, and that's it. And just feel it, and just sit and breathe into it and let it expand. You know, just as easy as you can put it, or maybe people find it difficult. I don't know. It's like I never tell anyone how to do anything, because if I start giving instructions, people then get confused and start to work. Well, do you have to do this? Do you have no? It's a game of feeling, testing, and working it out for yourself. Because once you've done it, you know how to do it again. So if it takes practice, but you can move your attention and focus, let's say, to anywhere. Your heart, your shoulder, your hands, your third eye, your throat chakra. You can move it down all your chakras. And it was interesting. I had some woman who I was working with years ago who did like this, I don't know, astral body scan of me to see what was going on. And she was pretty accurate. It was more emotional, wasn't physical. And she said that down in actually it was the one above my navel, there was nothing going on, or even the one below. I can't, but she said she couldn't see anything. It was like static. I was like, what do you mean there's nothing going on there? And that's like, I think, you've got your lower chakra, which is like, I guess, so I'm not up on all the chakras. It doesn't, but I'm now, it's interesting, it's coming up in my life, so I'm looking at it, but apparently this one's for your will, your activation, your when you've got energy, you can then create things with it from there. And I had none, supposedly, which I wasn't happy about. And then someone recently gave me a box of essential oils to activate chakras. And honestly, I'm not really into all this sort of thing, but I took it and went, well, I'm going to try it. And guess what? She went, oh yeah, but there is one missing. And I knew which one it was going to be. The one I wanted and need, supposedly, was missing from the box. So there's obviously something pointing me to go, yeah, look at this. You're missing it. So I don't know what that is. So I've been cultivating. So I've been using this, moving my attention down my chakras. And it is like spinning a plate. So I'll try and get the third eye one and focus on that. And then I'll move to my throat. And then I forget about this one. And I'm back up there and trying to bring my attention. And I'm trying to... And it's a fun game. I don't know what I'm doing. But by the time I've got to the bottom one, I am in a state of stillness just because all my attention is not on thinking anymore. It's on trying to keep these things. So play games like this with yourself. It's amazing. I don't think you can do any harm at this point. I'm sure maybe there's things you can do that you don't want to do. Maybe be careful who you think of or what intentions you have at that moment, because maybe you're a little bit more potent. But so just... reminders, how do you feel? Check in on yourself. Getting into a car is a good one. Shut that door for dumb. You've got a moment there before you start that engine. Just check in. Enjoy that little bit of silence. And have a little conscious breath or move your attention to somewhere. Do that. So that's reminders. Triggers, I won't go into that because we've got some other stuff. Some little helpful advice on, things to consume or not consume. But they don't really make a difference. They do if you're suffering from anxiety. More sugar, caffeine obviously puts you up in a higher state. But like I always say, I used to have anxiety quite bad, and I couldn't drink anything with caffeine in it. I couldn't drink tea because it just straight away, as soon as I did it, that anxiety came up. But once I got to the bottom of what was causing the anxiety and started to work on it was my mind that was creating the anxiety. Once I started practicing presence and things like that, I can drink caffeine and it doesn't, like I say, it makes me get jittery if I have too much, because physically, but it doesn't affect me emotionally. So I always just think, drugs or stimulants or anything, they just highlight what's there. I'm not saying go out and do cocaine or whatever, because that's not good for anyone, but I'm just saying, there is people who can drink alcohol and they are pleasant, they don't get angry, and there's other people, they drink alcohol and they get angry. And I say it's not the alcohol, it's what's in them. It's exaggerating something that's buried inside, and drugs do that, which is why, proper drugs in proper scenarios, used in ritual practices and, ayahuasca, it brings out the things in you. And caffeine and nicotine are no different. They do use them as plant medicines in different ceremonies. So, but once, you start to quiet, and you can drink a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. I wouldn't say that's like, these things do not make you present. They're just to help if you're suffering at the time, and they, just check it out, see how you feel with all of these things. So I'm not giving you any medical advice whatsoever, but just check, see how you feel. That's how you do it. Now this has become a little ritual now. I use lots of different things, and I've just gone through some of them to be present, or to bring myself into the present moment, because we all do get lost. I get lost all the time. So throughout the day, I've got little things I do that are on there that bring me into the present moment. But this one, I've had so much fun with. Because funny enough, when I was talking about that third eye thing, I'd been doing that for years and I didn't even know what I was doing, because it was Alan Watts. If anyone knows who Alan Watts is, he's died, but I think he died in the 70s. He was like a philosopher and religious, I guess, religious teacher in some regards. He covered lots of different, spiritual backgrounds and wisdom traditions. But he used to talk about, and I did say this in one of my talks once, and obviously it went down like a lead balloon. No one got it, because, you can use observation of breath to bring you into the present moment. You can do body awareness, so that's like you put the focus on your body. I'm not going to give you too much. You do that how you like, but you can move your energy and focus and attention onto your... Most people use your heart. It's a nice one, but I started with breath. I would just observe the breath and just see what it's doing. Not changing it, not inhaling any deeper. Just what's it doing at the moment? And I just keep bringing my breath. And then I heard someone mention about, I think it was Eckhart Tolle, that little gap at the bottom of the breath and at the top of the breath. Focus on that, and that's even less, because there's a tiny pause when you breathe, and you can focus on that top and the bottom. So there's lots of different ways you can remind yourself to be present. But this one's just a fun one that I found in a book, and then since wrote it on bookmarks, just so that when I'm reading a book, I see the bookmark and it always reminds me. So that's a good little tip. But we're going to do it. We did it at the talk, which was quite funny, and someone's phone went off the minute I said this next thing. But it's a good one to do, and you'll see what I mean, because when you do it, it's eyes open again. We're not meditating here. We're not trying to do anything. We're just observing. We're just going to see what happens. So when I say what could happen in the next moment, we sit vigilant, aware, alert, and we're going to just see what happens. You should already know what's coming now, so you're getting ready for it. So what could happen in the next moment? Good, isn't it? Because I bet everyone noticed that humming, whatever that noise is that you didn't notice before. And it's just anything can happen. I'm not going to go into detail, but I've had loads of weird stuff happen, and it's just not even weird. It's just the most mundane thing, but I would never have noticed it unless I did that. So it's a good little thing. So when you're finding your spot, sitting on, whatever, just ask that question and sit there and wait. And whatever happens next, it's always miraculous to you. And it could be a bird flies past and you're just like, or a noise happens. It's just to create. No, it's not to create, actually. It's to understand the beauty that's constantly going on, and we miss it. Like, people talk about synchronicities, things that happen in their life and the flow and blah, blah. They're going on non-stop. We're just not there. We're not there to see it. We're not there to experience it. We're not there to know it's happening. That's why when one happens, we go, you won't believe this coincidence. That's going on all the time. But we ain't there. It's just going, there's another one. There's another one. There's another one. Oh, you missed that one. I'm going to have to make this one really big, really obvious for you to notice. But I'm saying when you learn to be still and quieter, and that, you could call it strange things start to happen. They're not. They're just things you never noticed, So that one I use. But Alan Watts used to say, sorry, I jumped the gun there, but different things to find presence. What's behind the eyes, he used to say. Look with what's behind the eyes. And I used to love that, because it puts you into this, you're not looking with your eyes anymore. You're looking through your eyes. And then you can sort of say, well, who's doing the looking now? Because it's not the physical thing. What's behind my eyes that's looking out onto this world? And I said that one at one of my other talks, and it was like, yeah. So I don't know, but I used to love that because it visually puts or energetically, or I don't know how you put it, your attention moves behind your eyes and you're now viewing out through your eyes. So you're not you anymore. You're not this personality, this person with a name, a job, the problems, the woes and that. You're now just looking out at the wondrous or crazy or turbulent. It doesn't matter. You're now viewing it from a slightly stiller, quieter place, which is from inside. So there's my introduction, which does go on a while, but the reason I use it, it allows me to go off in all these different directions and different things. So that's the buffer sheet. It's not all written down on there what I said because I elaborate, but take that home and, you know, have a little look through and practice them. And it should be fun. This is not about punishing yourself. This is about exploring different things. Right. I had to write my notes out because my printer didn't work. So, right. We've already touched on some of it. I've got here straight away, information versus experience. I'm sitting here conveying information, words, stories, things to try, whatever, which is great. You know, I'm glad you all come to hear it, but my goal is I want you to experience it. So then you don't have to come back anymore. It's more just a motivational thing. Or enjoyment. You come to remind. You know, I know some of you here have practiced it and you've gone to, you know, different workshops and you know presence. So to experience is the key. And we was talking about this. I was on a podcast thing the other day and was, you know, to go out and do and experience it is the key. You know, you can read as many books as you like about presence, meditation, stillness, you know, spiritual teachings, but to practice and cultivate it yourself is key. So just the buffer sheet is brilliant because it just gets you into a little bit of a habit because you can get out of the habit so quickly. Life gets carried away and you forget. So what I'm trying to do is get you, so like even doing that, what could happen in the next moment is just to get you to feel it for a second. And, you know, it should be enjoyable, but I've got to say, being present is not all about bliss, love and light. It isn't. It's about observing whatever's going on in you and accepting and understanding that. So if, you know, everyone's saying, oh, I meditate and it's always blissful and everything, well, you're not doing it properly, I'm afraid. You're not. Because it isn't all blissful, because I don't know anyone who has not got crap in them. Guilt, shame, toxic, whatever. We've all got it in there. We've all got it. So anyone who tells me that they're always just meditating, it's like, well, you're missing half of it. And that's a shame. We don't like the darker side of things. But in my experience, the more I've looked at uncomfortableness, things that aren't so pleasant, the more joy I experience in my life. You can't have one without the other. And I think it was Carl Jung who said, you know, for the leaves or the branches to touch heaven, the roots have to touch hell. Meaning you can't have one without the other. And that doesn't mean you dwell in darkness and shadow, but to acknowledge it and accept it and do your part to clear it. So, you know, just observe. I don't know why I went so dark on that one, but, you know, but it's true. So to experience these things is key. So I'm hoping you take some of it and you experience it. Right. Because once you hear the voices, which I did touch on, we've already talked about it. Once you hear that voice in your head, or multiple voices, depending, you know, there's good ones, bad ones, ones that are a bit nastier than others. I don't know what they are, where they are, if it's what's going on. You know, it's all us. It's all part of us. So, you know, some people call it entities. You know, the pain body could be described as this, like, you know, a parasitic thing that's just annoyed all the time, wants to feed on negative energy. And it feels like that. And it could be that. But I never give them labels. And regardless whether they're external, internal, they're coming through me. So it's my responsibility to try to quieten them and not listen to them and do my part. So, I talk to some people all about entity, possession, and, your ego is an external thing, and it could be, but it's still coming through me, so it's my responsibility. So I just go, well, it's within me. Why is it within me? My responsibility to quieten that and still that and not let it leak out onto the world. I'm going big tonight. We're going into some darker territory tonight. Usually it was quite up, but so to hear them voices and to know stillness is key, and you don't have to do anything with it. Once you've heard the voices, you now know they're going on. It's not just me telling you. So that's information versus experience. This is not just me telling you about the mind being chattery all the time. You know it is. So now you sort of can't deny that. We all know it does. But I want you to get the other side of it when it quietens, and you'll go, oh my God, this is so much better. Life feels better when my mind is not comparing, criticising others or yourself. So I wish that for you. I hope that for you. I've got a big title here, ego, which I never used to use that word, the ego. But there's so many names for what I'm describing here, the mind, the ego, the personality. I think Freud called it the id. I'm not up on all these. I'm not a scholar or so there's multiple names for this thing that we call the mind that's busy. Monkey mind, people call it, whatever. Personality, persona. This is a big one because I honestly don't believe we are what we think we are. And people go, what do you mean by that? Well, we are born, we're given a name, we have a family, we have, brought up in certain circumstances, and yes, they shape us, they are what we are today. But ultimately, I talked about this in the last one, I feel that there's something behind, which I'd say is consciousness, which is part of the bigger consciousness, which, yes, we have personalities, and I'd say the ego's job should be, or personality should be, our interaction of the inner, perfect, untouched light being that we are, which we don't know we are, that was never harmed, never been damaged, nothing, it's untouched, can't be. We've just encased it in this thing. And the ego is meant to be our way of expressing and communicating with everybody else. That's it. But it gets involved in everything. Our emotional states, our beliefs, our fears, our patterns and everything. And it's now took over the whole show, and it's diminished what we really are because we're acting out of all personality, all ego, as opposed to this thing behind it. I'll go into that in a bit. So I just wanted to touch on that if anyone didn't know, because really what you're talking about is presence, is to lose your ego in that moment. You're not functioning through this identity. When you're truly present, and we've all had experience it, maybe watching a sunset or something that's big enough to wake us up, let's say, out of our mind chatter. You don't sit there as the name, the history and the thing. You're just there. You're there to witness it. And you're just there to enjoy it and feel it. So that info versus experience, we're trying to feel that which is behind the mind. And I just wanted to address what ego is for some that don't know it, mind, persona. And it's a tough one because people go, I'm not that. We are. And the reason we resist it so much, we don't, the mind does. The mind goes, shut up, ignore that, don't worry about him, he doesn't know what he's talking about, we're all right as we are, blah, blah. That ain't you. That's the mind saying these things. So anyway, I just wanted to talk a little bit about ego. I've got anxiety and depression in a box, because apparently I don't always talk about it so much, and it's on my posters. So for me, I had anxiety and I've had depression. And anxiety, I learnt to like anxiety, and that sounds like a weird thing to say, but it was a really good one to work with. Depression, different different beast, depression. Depression, I would say, is rather than it feeling like it lives in one place in your body, it covers the whole senses and it dulls you and it makes the world out there look dark because you're under something. You know, they call it the black dog, the black cloud, dark clouds following you. But that was different. The anxiety, it's shorter, it's sharper. It lives where it wants to live, but it's usually around, you know, your torso, in here. It can go to the left, it can go to the right. But the reason I say I ended up liking it is when I was practicing being present, I wanted something to practice on. You know, it's like if you're learning tennis and you're on your own, and you hit it against the wall, you want an opponent, you want someone to test out your backhand or your forehand. So anxiety for me, when it used to, you know, I started this process of learning to quiet my mind because my mind was going crazy because of anxiety. So once I got a little bit of a handle on it and learned to quieten, which is just observation, and we're going to talk about the stages of that, but anxiety is a good one. And basically anxiety is a fear of the future, a lack of trust in ourselves in that future, which is usually nonsense because we're all still here today, and I'm sure we've gone through more troublesome things than this thing that may be causing you anxiety. You're here, you're living, you made it, you survived all them other anxiety feelings and you're here, you didn't die. But the ego doesn't like you to just sit and be still. It wants something to do, so it will turn things into bigger than they are. But anxiety, honestly, it's a good one to sit with, because when you have it and it comes up, and it can be debilitating for some people, it affects everything because it can freeze the body. I know someone whose legs go, you know, it's debilitating. They just struggle to walk because everything in you starts to tighten up. So I'm not talking when you have a full-blown anxiety attack and go, oh, this is great. You know, I'm talking we're trying to alleviate it getting worse. So just in the morning, I always used to notice it in the morning. I'd get up, which is why I notice it in the morning, is nothing's bloody happened yet. So I shouldn't be anxious. I've literally just woken up and I'm sitting there making a cup of tea, and suddenly you're like, oh, no one's around me doing anything. I've not had a phone call, an email, nothing. There was nothing going on. So that was why I always used to notice that one in the morning. And I'd sit out on my step and I'd just sit with it and I'd watch my breath. And because what happens is the anxiety can then flip into the mind. The mind will then tell you that you should be anxious. Oh God, this is happening. Oh no, it's going to be terrible. They're going to think this is going to happen. And then that turns back into an emotion and it goes back into the body. Then that turns back into a thought, and you're now in this cycle. And if you do not stop that cycle, you can end up in a mess. So I would catch that one in the morning with my cup of tea and a cigarette, and I'd sit with it. And I'd almost say hello to it. I go, oh. Not sort of, I did. I used to say, oh, hello, you're there, okay. And I would like, you said about putting your attention on your feet. I don't want to give too much detail because it's for you to do. If anyone's suffering from anxiety, it actually has a residence in your body. It lives somewhere. So just put your attention on it and try and stop the mind. So every time the mind wants to add to the story, you put your attention back on this thing. But then use your breath to breathe through it a bit, if that makes sense. So you're just feeling it. I can't give you any more really example than that because I want you to try and do it. And you may cock up and your anxiety might get worse, but you've got nothing to lose. So try it, and I guarantee you'll start to know what I mean, and you'll be like, oh. So you just let it do what it's got to do, but you're not feeding it. So eventually it will.
It's hard not to feed it, though, isn't it?
That's the trick.
That's the hardest bit.
Oh, this is all hard because we are so used to these patterns. Yeah. We don't know any bloody different. Honestly, we don't. We don't know any different. And I don't blame anyone for not knowing any different because we're all brought up in a world where this is how we do it. You go around to someone and you're suffering from anxiety and you moan about your problems and they just tell you, you're right. They shouldn't have said this to you, and they shouldn't. That's what we do as a culture. We're all feeding everybody else's anxiety, anger, depression, criticism, people love it. I mean, honestly, I was around someone the other day, and they're quite good at getting all the old gossip going. And it's like there's an invisible, enticing thing pulling me into it, and I'm like, and you know what else? Oh my God, and I have to pull. You genuinely have to put. It is so enticing. It's juicy. Me and my friends call it juicy, but it's so bloody juicy. You want to get involved. Your brain's like, no, we want to be a bit of this. So don't ever think you're the only one struggling. It takes time, patience, and practice. But it's once that loop's going and you move it from here, it then triggers the mind then triggers more feeling, and then you're in it. And I did talk about the 3-part yogic breath. I know that sounds like a right mouthful, and I was pissed off when someone said it, because I said it last time. Why is it not just one breath? Why does it have to be a 3-part breath? But go look it up on YouTube. I'm sure there's videos on it. It works because it's so distracting, because you have to do this 3-part thing. I'm not going to go into it because I did it on the last one. You bring in 3 breaths, and you have to sort of time them so they're in this one sort of breath before the exhale. It's so good. You lay on the floor, you do it, and it does work. And I realised why she told me to do it and why it was annoying me. It was 3 parts, because it actually works. So like that can help when it starts to get too much and you're in that cycle. Go and do something different. If you can't sit there with it, don't punish yourself and then you go mad and go and do, if you got a distraction. Pardon?
We've done 5 minutes of Tai Chi this morning.
Anything to take you out. Yeah, it's amazing.
And then we went, right, let's do some Tai Chi. We're doing that.
Anything.
It did help, didn't it?
Yeah.
It did help.
But once, ultimately, you don't have to do anything with it if you learn to sit with it.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds like a big thing, because you go, it's awful.
Yeah.
But I'm not talking about the big ones. I'm talking, if a little one happens, but you can start with, I'm not talking about full-on anxiety attacks. It's a different kettle of fish. But the smaller anxiety, that ball that lives, the knot, the thing you're worried about, the whatever's just coming up, you can just sit and play with that and see what it feels like to just let it. Honestly, someone's explained to me, and I did acid as a teenager, not for any spiritual reasons, just purely recreation. I took way too much. It's a long story, but I ended up having quite a spiritual experience on it. And while I was in, there was infinite space held within me. People go and do ayahuasca, they'll tell you this. They all see the same stuff, so I'm pretty sure it's showing you something. I'm not recommending anyone go out there again, for the record. Right? But even back then, when I was like 15 or whatever, I felt this expandedness within me. And so later someone spiritually was, sort of teaching me about, letting anxiety do what it does. And they said, because you have this space inside you that is infinite. And I knew what they meant, because I'd done acid when I was 15. I went, oh my God, I know that space. I was in there for hours. I couldn't get out. It was like, it was huge. And then every time someone was panicking that I was sitting in silence, I had to go all the way back out again. I'm like, I'm all right, just leave me. I'm exploring, and I'll go back in. But I've felt that expanse. So when I say let that anxiety expand in you, you can. Yeah. Just picture this void inside a universe, infinite universe, and you can just go on, anxiety, do what you like. Take up as much space as you like, because it's infinite. And in doing that, you get the feeling, what I'm saying is it softens it. You're not resisting it anymore. So when you resist, what energy is resistance? It's pushing it against. So what do you get back if we understand the reality of this universe? Whatever we put out, it comes back. We get resistance back. So that's why anxiety grows into a bit of a monster when we're fighting it and battling it and doing all these things. So what we're trying to do is love it and let it do what it needs to do. Because ultimately it's there to show you something. And it's there to show you a belief you have about yourself that is not true. Ultimately. Because whatever it's telling you, you're not good enough and you're not going to be able to do, or you've done, bullshit. I don't even need to know what it is. It's bullshit. You are. Everyone. No one isn't. And it just lies to us because it's protecting itself. It's not a baddie. It's created these patterns and developed these things around us to protect us and buffer us from pain. And it doesn't need to anymore. We're all grown up now. We don't need them patterns anymore. So yeah, went big again. So when I talk about observation and attention, there's like stages to presence. And the first stage you go through, which is meaning you're trying to observe what's really going on, not what the mind is saying. So first stage is observation without judgment. You might do that for a year. You might do that for a month, depending on how much you're bringing these quieter moments into your life. But observation without judgment basically means, we touched upon it earlier, you're just trying to be still enough to hear the mind. And you don't care what it says. You're not there to judge it. It may make you think you're not a very nice person because you might say something. I mean, I don't know. When I always do these and I always make a little voice for what my head says, I don't know if anyone else is as nasty in their head as me, but I'm a really critical. I've been a critical bastard. I make comments about everyone. I think this and think that. And if I thought that was me, my essence, my true self, then that would be awful. Because I go, well, I'm not a particularly nice person, but I now know that is not me. That is a protection system to either make me feel better than someone else or make someone else feel worse than me. It's not me. So when I do these little voices, I always wonder if everyone's going, bloody hell, he's much worse than me. I don't have negative thoughts, but I suggest we do, and they're not yours. So observation is just to see what our mind does, how our body reacts in any situation. So the reason I didn't go on to triggers, so if say someone triggers you, what our ultimate goal is just to observe it and be grateful. Forget the grateful bit for the moment. We're just there to observe it because it's showing us a hell of a lot about ourselves. Why, and then you don't have to do it in the moment, but we're just trying. That's observation without judgment. Whatever the mind does, whatever it says, whatever feelings come up, we're not there to judge it and go, oh my God, I shouldn't have done that, and I shouldn't have thought that, and I shouldn't, because you're not fixing it. We're not here to fix it yet. It's like, we're doing an analysis to see what's going on. So observation without judgment, constant observation, just seeing what you are, what your mind does. So you have to be present to do that. So presence really is ultimately, it's a journey. The more you can catch the mind, that's presence. The more you notice you didn't catch your mind, that's presence. The more you hear the mind, that's presence. We're not talking about having to be enlightened here and in it all the time. We're just using observation of what is going on. What is? So you can say, well, I felt uncomfortable there. Was there any need for it? Uncomfortable. Don't judge it. Don't ask anything at the time, but you can go back and visit and go, that is interesting. This made me feel this. This made me think this. This made me do this. I couldn't help but have that bar of chocolate. I couldn't stop just observe the stuff. I always just say, if you want to see who you are, nature programs, always a great example. They don't go in there bulldozing and noisy and expecting the squirrels to behave naturally, do they? They have to stand back and observe to see what it is, what the squirrels are naturally doing. So we're trying to do that with us. We're trying to learn something about ourselves by observing without judgment. And people don't like that because stuff can come up, like I say, thoughts come up, and thoughts are awful sometimes. We think terrible things of people, and it isn't us. Because there's this unworthiness at the bottom of it all. So if it thinks it can put someone down to make us feel better, it's sort of trying to help us. But it's not very good. It's like either making them worse or comparing. It's a great example. You either think you're better than someone, which is not good for them or for you, or you think they're worse than you, which is not good for them. Like, it's a no-win situation, but we compare everything. Well, I preferred that. I preferred this. That's a comparison. What is that? This is shit. That was good. That is good. This is shit. There's no winning comparing, but we do it all the time. I'm not as bad, at least I'm not as bad as them. They drink 10 pints a night, I only had 4. Like, what is that? What are we measuring against? What are we comparing to? So, like, you only have one thing you can compare to, and that is yourself, which you can't do. So that's why I say you can compare yourself to what? There's nothing to compare it to. So that's why. So just watch these thoughts, right? That's observation. And then you'll start to go, oh, there are some insecurities in me. Now that's interesting. Or, oh, there's a bit of pride. I think I'm really good at that. Oh, don't judge it yet. You're just observing. Well, so stage 1 of presence, I would say, is this observation without judgment. And make it fun. When I hear I might be washing up, and if I've got caught in a thought, and I might say something derogatory or go, oh yeah, well, I think I always go, ooh. I hear it, and I'm like, oh, look at that. That wanted to go into that juicy little mind and start going, well, remember, and honestly, it can be years old. I was having a cigarette the other day, and some guy I used to work with popped into my head. And I went, oh yeah, that passed him, didn't it? And I caught it, and I was ready to go full-blown bitch fest, right? And I went, oh, I notice it, I know. So that's what we're aiming for, right? That you start to notice them and you nip them in the bud before they go. Because honestly, how many times have people washed up and 20 minutes later, you've just been there. You ain't washing up. You've got into a real juicy one. I mean, some are nice. You can have dreamy ones of things that were good. But really, when you drop out of it, you're usually left going, well, that was better than fucking washing up. So it ultimately doesn't help if you're thinking of something good. Be there. Enjoy the washing up. Or don't enjoy the washing up. We're talking about observing. So we're aiming to get there so we can nip them thoughts in the bud so it keeps us present. So the observation stage, then it's like learning to quieten. So once you start, I mean, honestly, once you start to hear the voice, you're rocking. And if you can start to catch it and not let it run on for 20 minutes, and you maybe stop it after 10 minutes, and then maybe 5 minutes, and then 4, 1, 30 seconds, whatever. There's no, when do I move to the next stage? You're doing it. You're already moving. If you start to observe the mind and you don't judge it, you're already moving into the next stage, because eventually, if you can catch that, you're now creating stillness and you're quieting it. So instead of 20 minutes while washing up thinking about that bastard at school that stole this, which was 50 years ago, and you still bloody remember it, honestly, the mind is just like, I'll grab anything. Give me anything. I don't give a shit. I'll just turn it into some, bitch fest in your mind. But so if you can catch that, you're saving time. You'll bring yourself back into the washing up. So you're already into stage 2, which is to learn to quieten. So if you can create that less thought by observing it first, just notice how much you're in thought, and then you can start to catch it. Then you're in stage 2 and it's now starting to quieten. And then stage 3, I don't know what you're going to do with all this energy and stillness and space and focus and attainment, all these good words, because once you learn to quieten the mind, you can do some good shit with that, because you're now here, you're in the room, you're with this person, you're having a conversation with this person. You can do stuff when you're present that you wouldn't normally do, because most of the time we're acting on autopilot, behaviours, patterns, all of these things that are learned from trauma and parents teaching us to act this way or that way. It doesn't really matter. They're all learned. These are patterns, programs and behaviours. When you strip that away and you're now coming from a place of presence, which is a stillness that doesn't give a shit about the past and it doesn't give a shit about the future. It's just here. So when you listen to someone, like I said, in that state, good shit starts happening. I mean, honestly, a little one I used to talk about this one. It's a good one to play with. When you're talking to someone, I mean, Eckhart Tolle used to say it, and I used to love this one. Listen with your whole body. Giving you no more explanation than that, go away and practice it. But if someone's talking about something and you're not that bothered about it, you're not that interested, or they're going into maybe a complaint or a gossip or something, take a conscious moment, breath, and put all your attention on your body and then listen from there. Because one, it means you don't join in, which is a bonus, because because if they're gossiping or doing it, and start listening with your body, they either shut up or they then start saying something interesting, because something in them knows that you are now listening, and most people do not listen. We all stand there and listen, but most of the time we're working out what we're going to say before they've even finished talking. Again, no judgment, that's what we do. Because we're now preparing, so they're talking about something, you're going, oh yeah, that happened to me last. Most conversations is you tell them one thing, they tell you what their similar interaction was of it, then you come back and tell them, oh yeah, and that happened to me. Is that a conversation? Is that really, we're just sharing, basically? I mean, what it's moved into now, people don't even use words. They just get their phone out and show you shit. Look at this. This is where I went. This is who I was with. Look, listen to this joke. This is... I won't engage in that. If someone gets a phone out and tries to show me something, I go, no, thank you. I'm not here to talk to the phone. I've come here to have a conversation with you. All right, if it's someone's grandchild and they want to show you a picture or whatever. And Michelle, Michelle comes out and she showed her garden, or, she's got a peacock with. Fair enough. But if someone's just sharing a joke on TikTok, I can look at that myself. I was just going, just send it to me, thanks. I'm not going to look at it on your phone while we're engaging. Thankfully, I don't know many people who do that. But so listen with your whole body and just see what happens. And honestly, it's an amazing one. When you get it right, they could be saying the most inane thing that you're not really interested in, and and you're now locked eyes and you're listening, and you're like, and then they might just go, do you know what happened to me the other day? I had this feeling come up, and they will share some. Not every time, it depends on what you're doing or where they're at or whatever. If they've had 10 pints and they're talking gibberish, then they're not going to come back to being conscious and telling you something amazing at that point. But try that, listening with the body, and just see what happens. I don't know I've got the time. I feel like oh well, we're doing well. I've been going. I see a couple of yawns there, and I was like, shit. Right, how long have I been talking for? Right. So that was the stages. Yeah, I wanted to end on something, because I really found this. So what all of this is pointing to, which I haven't really gone into much because I've spent a bit more time on other things, is if you want to change your world, the world, this is how you do it. You learn to quieten the mind, observe yourself, and see what's really going on inside, and you're not then spilling out any negativity, any problems, you're not adding. What we're aiming for here is to not add any more shit to the world. And ultimately, when you practice this presence and stillness and start to get this feeling of the inner you, the true self, whatever you want to call it, consciousness, the light body, I don't care what you call it, God, divine, whatever you want, there's something that lives in us, a soul, spirit, I don't care. You can feel it. When you're quiet and you're still, you can feel it. There's something. And it's all-knowing, perfect, untouched, like I always say, and I keep saying it is. As much as the shit that happens to us as a personality, a human being, an ego, it never touches that. When we move on from this place, it's like, whew, that was a fucking tough ride. I think next time I'm going to pick an easier one, but it doesn't get damaged. We have a belief system that we are damaged. We are, like, even when everyone talks about trauma, it's okay. Everyone talks about healing. I get it. That's what it feels like. But the thing inside your true self doesn't need, you were never broken. You're not. The external ego can be broken. The personality can be damaged because it all lives up here. But that doesn't. So ultimately what we're trying to do is change ourselves and understand, not even change ourselves, understand what we are and not fight against what is. So we're out there constantly liking this, not liking that, trying to change things. Someone's rude to me, I want to change them. Someone says something offensive, I don't like this situation, I want to change the world. We're always looking out to change it on the outside, when ultimately, when you change your relationship to it, which is you change yourself, it does paradoxically change. It does. I don't know how. Like, I had a great thought this morning, and I don't know if it's a good demonstration of how your relationships to something does change it. And you go, you can't change things out there by changing your inside. Yes, you can. It's been windy, hasn't it? Everyone knows how shit the weather's been in April.
Oh, yeah.
It's been crap. It's like, I'm living right by the water. It's been windy. And I've got to say, it's annoyed me that it's annoyed me, because I'm meant to be practicing this what is, and I'm going, for fuck's sake, another windy day, right? We've had so many windy days. And it was only this morning, right? So now I'm annoyed at the wind. I'm annoyed at the wind, right? We all know how futile that is. Even the fact it's wind, it's an invisible force that I'm annoyed at, because what it is, it could be sunny, and I look out the windows where I live, and it's like by the water, and I'm like, oh my God, it's a beautiful sunny day, and then I open the doors, and I'm like, I can't sit out there when it's windy. So anyway, I'm not going to change that wind, am I? You'd say, I cannot make that wind better, right? Impossible. Well, I did today, I changed it. And you go, how the fuck did you change it? I thought, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get a kite. And then, do you know what? I'm going to love that fucking wind. And when it ain't windy, I'm there going to be pissed off because I can't fly my kite. So I changed my perception internally of what that wind is. And I'm not making this up. I only thought of it this morning and I went, oh, please stay. I want to go and get a kite. I'm going to order one probably on Amazon now. I'm going to be praying that it stays windy for the next 3 days. And I've changed my relationship to the wind by changing something that I could change. I can't change the wind, but I can change how I view it or how I see it or how I perceive it. So if you say you cannot change, I didn't actually change the wind, but I have changed how the wind now looks for me. So, ultimately what presence does is you're seeing what your annoyance is and you realise how futile it is, and then you realise the change actually has to happen inside, because it ain't going to change outside. I always say, you're not going to meet anyone. Like, if you decide, I don't want to meet any more arseholes, good luck with that. I don't know how you're going to do that. I don't know how you're going to move around this world. But I'm going to end on this little prayer, because I see it. This woman called Laura Matsu posted it on Facebook, and I really liked it. And it was from a saint. I think she was a Catholic or Christian saint. And it says, I was kneeling in prayer in the chapel. I was thinking of something that was coming into my life that filled me with apprehension. I knew it was not the will of God that I should be saved from this experience. Even at that moment, it was moving towards me. Suddenly, God told me the prayer he would listen to. And I said quickly, change no circumstance of my life, change me. I think we're going to end on that. Thank you very much. Don't ham it up too much. Where's my recorder? But yeah, thank you, everyone. And if anyone wants another drink, we've got the place until 9. Is it warm in here?
Yeah.